this is Markability with the Art of Diesel, where we are all about diesel and automotive efficiency, performance, and independence. And I want to just give you a quick update today. I've been going head down and charging on some things and really haven't been communicating much, but I want you to know what I'm doing here. It's actually kind of an interesting project. This is our ML320 CDI, otherwise known as Mary Lou. What happened to Mary Lou here is that the engine basically died. The body is really good on this vehicle. I mean, if we get up underneath here and you got a real good look at everything, yeah, things might not be the cleanest, but everything's solid down here, okay? There might be a little surface rust on the rear suspension components, but it's really not half bad. This vehicle is really solid at 205,000 miles, and what I didn't want to do is get rid of it. For the price of another engine, I could not replace this vehicle. So I figured let's go ahead and get another engine. So what I did is I built this dolly using 4x6s, 4x4s, some old, like, I don't know, 2x10s, 2x12s. Scrap wood I had laying around, and added some casters I picked up off Amazon. It would have, about 1,200 pounds of capacity, and lowered the vehicle on top of it, shimmed it until everything was just touching. Then what I did is I unbolted the subframe. Well, actually, first I disconnected all the hoses and the electric harness and things like that. Also disconnected the upper ball joints and just let the lower control arms come down with it. Of course, I had to take the brake calipers off here and all of that. They're up there hanging from upper control arms. And so I dropped all of this out of the vehicle so it would be easier to work on it, because I picked up for, I think it was 4,000 bucks, a low mileage OM642. Yes, it's the same engine. And I've just been going through it carefully just to make certain everything is all right. And you can see here that I've already moved over the injectors. I had to pull the valve covers because I checked chain stretch. Everything looks great inside this engine. 91,000 miles isn't very many miles, and I think this engine was well taken care of because it was nice and clean inside. I took off the oil pan as well and looked up in there, and everything in this engine looks really, really clean. What didn't look so good at 91,000 miles were the intake ports, and I went through and hit those with a media blaster with walnut shells. And what I did, just to describe that process, the firing order on an OM642 goes like 1, 4, 2, 5, then 3 and 6. So it goes like this: right, left, or actually from the engine perspective, right, it goes front to rear. It goes right, left, right, left, right, left, just like that. And so what I did with that in mind was I found top dead center, looking at the pulley. There's a marking on the pulley here, and there's a place to line it up right here. And I looked for where the valves would be closed, and actually I had the glow plugs out so I could see I could feel when air was coming up out of that cylinder. I knew I was approaching top dead center with the cam in the right position to close these valves, right? Because it would only do that on alternating rotations. On the next one, it would not be the right time to do this. But I went ahead and got this cylinder to top dead center with the valves closed. Then what I did was, I kept everything else masked off, went in, did my walnut blasting using a media blaster with walnut shell media, and knocked it all out, vacuumed it out, cleaned it up, then taped that back over, rotated this 120 degrees, went to the next cylinder, and continued that process until I had all the valves cleaned. These intake ports and the valves had a lot of gunk on them. Diesel engines with EGR active will tend to get that way. There's not a whole lot you could do about it other than what I do, which is once I get my hands on these engines, I shut it off. So these valves from here on should actually stay very clean. So I've been moving parts over from this engine to this engine. And yes, I've gotten as far as putting the injectors in. I did buy new glow plugs that are in here. This engine did come with an injection pump on it. I'm going to use that one. I did paint some parts and clean them up. I replaced the water pump. And of course, because I had access to it, I went ahead and replaced the seals on the oil cooler. This is a known issue on the OM642s. And when I pulled it, the seals were purple. So somebody had done it at one point, but there's no harm. You know, when, when I'm just a few bolts away from pulling it off and putting in new seals, it's worth doing just to make absolutely certain that I don't have that problem in this engine. And yes, it's a nice clean engine. I did take my starter off. It's one of the first things I took off this engine was the starter so that I could do a compression check, and this engine actually compression checks just fine. I will tell you that I picked up a previous engine off eBay, and I'd almost have to use the word fraud for what I saw, because this engine came in and that engine had Black Death on cylinders 3 and 6, and then cylinders 2 and 5 had no compression, weren't even moving the needle. And that guy even tried to cheat me on the refund, but I had to let eBay know, look, an engine with no compression isn't going to start. It's not just not as nice as I thought. The guy said he was selling an engine in good running condition, and it was not. But this engine came from a remanufacturing place that happened to have access to some used engines, and it actually did come with a warranty. It wasn't a whole lot more expensive than what I paid for that eBay engine shipped, and they actually brought it to my door right here. Pallets over there, put it on the engine stand with a cherry picker, and started digging in. And of course it did come with the intake manifold and a lot of other equipment installed. I pulled all of that off, saying I want to use my hardware, and a lot of my hardware is laying on the floor over here. Here's the wiring harness from the old engine, the exhaust manifolds, shields, the alternator, power steering pump, the intake elbow, air conditioning, the fuel lines. All this has been cleaned up carefully, and it's ready to go back on. Most of it. Some of it might still get it cleaned a little bit more, but most of this is ready to go on to that nice looking new engine. This is the intake manifold setup that came off that new engine, or newer, the one with 91,000 miles. EGR was active on that engine. To the best of my knowledge, it did not look like it had received any sort of modifications. And if we take a look at the intake manifolds here, they're upside down. I flipped them over after I took them off that engine. I did walnut blast the ports on that newer engine, but this I've done nothing to except take it off, and I wanted to show you what it looks like. These swirl vanes here that are on the alternating port, so one port for each cylinder gets a swirl vane, and this push rod here moves them back and forth. There's a motor up here that, or normally underneath when this thing's flipped over. And yes, these things get all caked up, and after enough miles of exposure to the exhaust gases coming back in and mixing with positive crankcase ventilation, what happens, you've got an oil mist. It meets up with some soot particles. It makes this grungy, gooey gunk that, let's see, you can see that. See that? This is what winds up coating your intake system on these vehicles everywhere downstream of where EGR comes in. And yeah, you can see it's been smeared a little bit here, but the bottom line is that this is not a good thing. This is a fairly low mileage engine. I've seen them look a lot worse than this. And for comparisons, let's take a look at the relatively clean manifold that I pulled off my older engine because I had disabled EGR on here a long time ago. All right, I've been cleaning these up a little bit, but I really had to do almost nothing to the inside. Yeah, I polished up things like all these sealing surfaces and that sort of thing, but to make certain everything seals. But what you need to know is that the way this looks inside, it's nice and clean. The swirl vanes have been gone for a number of years. EGR was disabled on this a number of years ago. You'll note that the EGR valve is still on here, but the tuning shuts it off so that it stays closed. It does not. The other thing I've done is I block off the port that comes into the intake, so the EGR gases would never have an opportunity to actually come into my intake. And the result was that I've done very little clean the inside. Fact is, I need to go through and blow some air through these. When I pulled this off, the only thing I could say was there's a film of oil in here, and that's because we still have positive crankcase ventilation. And the bottom line is that these manifolds both look really good, and it's important on these diesel engines for longevity to shut down that stupid exhaust gas recirculation system, because it is harmful to these engines. There's a little bit of stain down here, but this thing is nice and clean. So there's very little that has to be done with these manifolds. I'm just cleaning them up. I masked them up, shot some fresh paint on them, reinstall the sensors, and they're going to go right onto that new engine. So these are from the old engine because EGR was shut down for a number of years. The intake runners stayed nice and clean. All right, later on you can see where I reinstalled the EGR cooler, and it's blocked off here. This is necessary because coolant flows through this to get to the heat in the cab. And later on that weekend, later on Saturday, I took this little bit of footage, and you can see here that I've got a lot more of the plumbing, the wiring harness, a lot of the accessories installed, and it's starting to look pretty close to being ready to reinstall. Thanks for watching.